I secretly bought a $21 million farm. When my son-in-law found out, he showed up at my door with his parents and suitcases, then locked me out. "You're too old to manage all this," he said. But I had installed cameras, and what I saw. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Lionel, and at 66 years old, I thought I had learned all there was to know about betrayal. I was wrong. 3 months ago, I made what I believed was the most generous decision of my life. I purchased a $21 million ranch in Montana, 3,000 acres of pristine land with a main house that looked like something from a magazine, complete with stables, cattle, and equipment worth more than most people see in a lifetime. I bought it in secret, planning to surprise my daughter Fallon on her 35th birthday next month. I wanted to give her and her husband Damon something that would secure their future, something that would make them proud of their old man. The irony tastes bitter in my mouth now. I had worked my entire life for this moment. Started with nothing, built my construction company from the ground up, saved every penny I could. My late wife Martha always said I was too generous for my own good, but I believed family came first. Always family first. The day Damon found out about the ranch, I was in my study paying bills when I heard his truck screech into my driveway. The engine was still running when he stormed through my front door without knocking. His face was red, and there was something in his eyes I had never seen before, something cold and calculating. "You bought a ranch?" he demanded, waving his phone in my face. $21 million, Lionel? Are you out of your mind?" My stomach dropped. How did he find out? I had been so careful, using a different bank, working with a discreet realtor. "Damon, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're spending my wife's inheritance behind our backs?" His voice was getting louder, and I could see the neighbors across the street peering through their curtains. "It's a surprise for Fallon's birthday," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You wanted to what? Play God with money that should be ours?" He stepped closer, and for the first time in the 5 years he had been married to my daughter, I felt afraid of him. I backed toward the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly. "Son, you need to calm down. Let me explain what I was thinking." "I'm not your son," he snarled, "and you're clearly not thinking at all. Do you have any idea what kind of responsibility that property is? The taxes alone could bankrupt you." Before I could respond, another truck pulled up outside, then another. Damon's parents climbed out of a black SUV, both dressed in expensive suits like they were heading to a business meeting instead of visiting their son's father-in-law on a Tuesday afternoon. Behind them, a moving truck rumbled to a stop. My blood went cold. "Damon, what's going on?" His mother, Patricia, clicked across my hardwood floors in her designer heels, barely glancing at me. "Hello, Lionel. We heard about your situation." "What situation?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand that whatever was happening had been planned. Damon's father, Robert, adjusted his tie and looked around my living room like he was appraising it. "The situation where you're clearly not capable of managing your finances anymore. $21 million on a whim? That's not rational behavior, Lionel." "It wasn't a whim," I protested, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. "I've been planning this for months. I wanted to surprise Fallon." "Surprises are for children," Patricia interrupted. "Adults make responsible decisions. They discuss major purchases with their family." I watched in growing horror as men from the moving truck began carrying boxes into my house. My house. "What are you doing? You can't just—" "We can, and we are," Damon said, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. "Ranch keys." "How did he get ranch keys?" "You're clearly not capable of managing that property, so we're going to help you." "Help me?" The word came out as a croak. Robert opened a briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "We've been in contact with the realtor. Nice woman, very concerned about elderly buyers making impulsive decisions. She was happy to provide us with copies of everything." My realtor, the woman I had trusted, the woman who had smiled and congratulated me on my generous gift to my family. She had sold me out the moment a bigger commission came along. "You have no right," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how pathetic I sounded. "Actually, we do," Patricia said, examining her manicured nails. "Damon is Fallon's husband. That makes him family. And family has to step in when someone is clearly having cognitive issues. Cognitive issues. The words hit me like a slap. I was many things, tired, maybe a little forgetful sometimes, certainly not as spry as I used to be, but there was nothing wrong with my mind. I'm not having cognitive issues, I said firmly. I made a business decision, a generous one. Damon laughed, but there was no humor in it. Generous? You mean reckless? Do you know what the property taxes are on that place? The maintenance costs? The insurance? You'd be broke within 2 years. That's my choice to make. Not anymore, he said, and something in his tone made my skin crawl. We're moving into the ranch today. Someone needs to make sure it's properly managed, and since you clearly can't handle the responsibility, I stared at him, finally understanding what was happening. This wasn't about protecting me or helping me. This was about taking what I had worked my entire life to give freely. You're stealing from me, I whispered. Robert stepped forward, his lawyer's voice smooth and practiced. We're protecting you from yourself, Lionel, and protecting Fallon's future. Surely you can understand that? I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning. These people, my daughter's in-laws, the man I had welcomed into my family, they were stealing everything, and they were making it sound like a favor. Get out, I said quietly. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Damon replied. In fact, you need to get out. Pack a bag, Lionel. You're coming with us. This is my house, and you're welcome to visit any time, Patricia said with false sweetness. But right now, you need supervision. Someone to make sure you don't make any more expensive mistakes. I looked around my living room, at the pictures of Martha on the mantel, at the chair where I read my morning paper, at the life I had built with my own 2 hands. Men were carrying boxes past me like I was invisible, like I didn't exist. I'm calling Fallon, I said, reaching for my phone. Damon was faster. He plucked it from my hands before I could dial. Fallon's on her way. She's very worried about you, Lionel. We all are. The way he said it made my stomach turn. Very worried about me, like I was a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed. I walked toward my bedroom to pack a bag, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. In the hallway, I passed the small security camera I had installed last month after the Hendersons down the street had been burglarized. Such a tiny thing, barely noticeable in the corner where the wall met the ceiling. They had no idea it was there. As I threw clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands, I could hear them talking in the other room, their voices carrying clearly through the thin walls of my modest home. How long do you think it'll take to get the property transferred? That was Robert. A few weeks, maybe a month if he fights it, Damon replied. But honestly, look at him. Does he look like he has any fight left? Their laughter followed me into my bedroom, cold and calculating. But as I zipped up my suitcase, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The same determination that had built my company from nothing, that had carried me through Martha's death, that had survived every challenge life had thrown at me. They thought I was just a confused old man. They had no idea what they had just started. The drive to the ranch felt like a funeral procession. I sat in the back seat of Damon's truck, watching my life disappear in the rearview mirror while Patricia made phone calls about managing Lionel's transition, and Robert reviewed legal documents like he was preparing for court. The ranch looked even more beautiful than I remembered. Rolling green hills stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with cattle that would now apparently belong to people who had stolen them from me. The main house sat like a crown jewel at the center of it all, stone and timber, with wraparound porches that Martha would have loved. Impressive, Amma, Robert said as we pulled up the circular driveway. No wonder you lost your head over this place, Lionel. I bit my tongue, lost my head. Like purchasing something beautiful for your child was a sign of mental instability. They had already assigned me a room. Not the master bedroom I had imagined enjoying. That was for Damon and Fallon, naturally. Not even one of the guest suites on the main floor. They put me in what used to be a maid's quarters, a small room off the kitchen with a narrow bed and a window that looked out onto the garbage bins. This will be perfect for you, Patricia said, smoothing the cheap bedspread they had brought from somewhere. Close to everything, easy for us to check on you. Check on me. The words made my skin crawl. I spent the first night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and listening to them move through what should have been my house. They talked loudly like I wasn't there, making plans and decisions about my property, like I had already died. The next morning, Fallon arrived. I was sitting on the back porch, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise, when I heard her car. My heart leaped. Finally, someone who would listen to reason, someone who would understand that this whole situation was insane. But when she walked onto the porch, the expression on her face made my coffee turn to ash in my mouth. "Oh, Daddy," she said, and her voice was full of the same false pity I had heard from her in-laws. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about you," I said quietly. "I wanted to surprise you for your birthday. I wanted to give you something special." She sat down beside me, but there was distance in her posture, like she was afraid I might be contagious. "Daddy, you can't just spend that kind of money without telling anyone. It's not responsible." "Since when do I need permission to spend my own money?" Fallon sighed, and I could see Damon hovering in the doorway behind her, listening to every word. "It's not about permission. It's about making smart choices. Damon and we've been talking, and we think maybe you're not seeing things clearly anymore." Not seeing things clearly. The same phrase her in-laws had used, like they had all practiced it together. "My vision is fine," I said, trying to keep my voice level. 20/20 with glasses. "That's not what I mean, and you know it." She looked uncomfortable, like she was reciting lines from a play she didn't want to be in. "You're 66 years old, Daddy. Maybe it's time to start thinking about slowing down, letting other people help you make decisions." I stared at my daughter, my only child, the little girl I had raised after Martha died, the young woman I had walked down the aisle just 5 years ago. When had she stopped being on my side? "Is that what you want?" I asked, "to make my decisions for me?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "I want what's best for you. And what's best for me is living in a maid's room while your husband plays Lord of the Manor with property I bought." "Damon's not playing anything," she said, and there was a sharp edge to her voice now. "He's trying to protect our family's future. Do you know what could happen if you keep making impulsive purchases like this? You could lose everything. We could lose everything. Everything. Like I was a liability instead of the man who had given her everything she ever had." Damon chose that moment to join us on the porch, carrying a steaming mug and wearing clothes that looked expensive enough to feed a family for a month. "Morning, Lionel," he said, with false cheerfulness. "How did you sleep?" "Like a guest in my own house." He laughed like I had made a joke. "Well, you are a guest, technically. This is Fallon's property now." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What did you say?" Fallon shifted uncomfortably, still not looking at me. "Daddy, we had to make some legal adjustments for tax purposes. The property is in my name now, but that doesn't change anything important." "It changes everything important." Damon sat down across from me, and his smile was all teeth. "Look, Lionel, I know this is hard to accept, but you're not 25 anymore. Running a property this size is a young man's job. There are decisions to make every day about the cattle, about maintenance, about finances. You should be relaxing, enjoying your golden years. Golden years. In a maid's room, while he made decisions about my cattle. What if I want to leave?" I asked suddenly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Fallon and Damon exchanged a look that made my stomach turn. "Leave? And go where?" Fallon asked carefully. "Back to my house. Back to my life." "Daddy, we've been through this. You need supervision now. You can't just live alone and make major financial decisions without someone to help you." "Someone like Damon. Someone like family," she corrected, but her voice sounded hollow. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the porch boards. "I'm going for a walk." "Don't go too far," Damon called after me. "This is a big property, easy to get lost." I walked toward the stables, my hands shaking with rage, and something else, something that felt like grief. I was mourning my daughter, I realized. The Fallon I had raised would never have treated me like this. That Fallon would have told her husband to go to hell before she let him humiliate her father. But that Fallon was gone, replaced by this stranger who spoke in Damon's words and looked at me like I was a problem to be managed. As I walked, I found myself studying the property with new eyes. There were security cameras everywhere, more than I remembered from the initial tour. They seemed to be focused not just on the perimeter, but on the house itself, on the areas where people lived and worked. I was being watched, constantly. That evening, as I picked at dinner in the formal dining room, where I was apparently allowed to eat but not make decisions, I listened to them talk about their plans. The south pasture would be perfect for development, Robert was saying, spreading papers across the table like he was planning a military campaign. Residential lots. We could easily get $2 million per acre. Development? I couldn't help myself. You want to turn ranch land into suburbs? Patricia smiled at me like I was a child who had interrupted adult conversation. We want to maximize the property's potential, Lionel. Cattle ranching is so unpredictable. Real estate development is much more stable. I looked at Fallon, hoping to see some flicker of the woman who used to love horses, who used to beg me to take her riding when she was little. But she was nodding along with her in-laws like this was perfectly reasonable. What about the cattle? I asked. We'll sell them, Damon said casually, cutting his steak. Cattle are just a liability anyway, too much work, too many variables. I had bought this ranch because I thought my daughter would love it. I had imagined her children, my grandchildren, growing up here, learning to ride, learning the value of hard work and the beauty of open spaces. Instead, they were going to turn it into cookie-cutter houses. After dinner, I excused myself and walked to my small room. The walls felt like they were closing in, but I forced myself to think clearly. Something was very wrong here, something beyond just a family disagreement about money. I pulled out my phone, the new one I had bought to replace the one Damon had taken, and did something I probably should have done days ago. I called my lawyer. Jim, it's Lionel Mackenzie. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, Lionel. What's going on? If I purchase property and then transfer it to my daughter for tax purposes, can she make decisions about that property without consulting me? There was a long pause. Lionel, what property transfer are you talking about? I didn't handle any property transfer for you. My blood turned to ice. The ranch, the $21 million ranch, Fallon said they transferred it to her name for tax purposes. I have no record of that, Lionel. And more importantly, any property transfer of that magnitude would have required your signature on multiple documents. Did you sign anything? I closed my eyes, remembering the stack of papers Robert had been carrying, the briefcase full of documents. No, I didn't sign anything. Then there's been no legal transfer. That property is still in your name, regardless of what anyone has told you. I hung up the phone with shaking hands. They had lied to me about everything. But if the property was still legally mine, what were they really doing here? And more importantly, what were they planning to do next? I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. But these weren't the peaceful sounds of a family sleeping. These were the sounds of people moving around, talking in low voices, making plans. And I realized with growing horror that I might not be a guest in my own house. I might be a prisoner. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of wallowing in my small room, I would gather evidence. If they thought I was just a confused old man, I would use that to my advantage. I waited until they were all busy with their morning routines, Damon making phone calls in what used to be my study, Patricia and Robert reviewing documents at the dining table, and Fallon doing whatever it was she did these days besides ignore her father's pain. The ranch's security system was more sophisticated than I had initially realized. As I walked through the house pretending to be taking my morning constitutional, I noticed cameras in every room, every hallway, every corner. They weren't just watching for intruders, they were watching everyone inside the house, including me. I found the main security hub in a room off the kitchen that I hadn't explored before. Banks of monitors showed feeds from every camera on the property. The system was recording everything 24 hours a day, with files automatically saved to a central server. My hands trembled as I accessed the footage from the past few days. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was Damon, the day after they had moved in, sitting in the master bedroom with a stack of documents spread across the bed. But these weren't the tax papers he had claimed to be reviewing. These were legal forms, power of attorney documents, conservatorship applications, competency evaluations. He was on the phone with someone, and even though there was no audio, I could read his lips clearly enough to catch phrases that made my stomach turn. Old fool. Easier than we thought. Completely trusting. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, watching my family move through my house like they owned it, which, according to them, they did. But it was the footage from late at night that really opened my eyes. After I had gone to bed, after the house had grown quiet, they held meetings. Real meetings. Damon, Patricia, Robert, and, yes, Fallon. All of them gathered around the dining room table like a board of directors planning a hostile takeover. I turned up the volume on the computer, leaning closer to catch their words. "The old man suspects something," Robert was saying, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed a document. "His phone call to his lawyer yesterday was concerning." My heart stopped. They had been monitoring my phone calls. "What did he say exactly?" Patricia asked, her manicured nails tapping against the table. "He asked about the property transfer, whether it was legal without his signature." Damon slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. "I told you we should have gotten him to sign the papers before we told him about the transfer. Now he knows something's wrong." "He doesn't know anything," Fallon said, and her voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "He's old, he's confused, and everyone who matters already thinks he's losing his mind." Everyone who matters. Her own father, and she was talking about him like he was already dead. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Robert said, pulling out another set of documents. "The conservatorship hearing is scheduled for next week. Once that goes through, it won't matter what he knows or who he calls." Conservatorship hearing? They were going to have me declared incompetent. "What about his assets?" Patricia asked. "The house, the business accounts, everything else?" Damon smiled, and even through the grainy security footage, I could see the greed in his expression. "Once we have conservatorship, we control everything. The ranch, his house, his business, his bank accounts, all of it will be managed by us, for his own protection, of course." They all laughed at that. Even Fallon. I sat back in the chair, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. This wasn't about protecting me or helping me manage my finances. This was about stealing everything I had ever worked for, and they were using my own generosity as the weapon to destroy me. But there was more. "What about after?" Fallon asked quietly. "After the conservatorship goes through?" Robert leaned forward, his lawyer's voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That depends on how cooperative he is. If he accepts the situation gracefully, he can live comfortably in a managed care facility. We've already found a place, very nice, very discreet. And if he doesn't accept it?" The silence that followed was more terrifying than any words could have been. Finally, Patricia spoke. "Men his age, under this kind of stress, with his history of heart problems, well, these things happen." My chest tightened. Heart problems? I had never had heart problems. My last physical had been perfect. "You're talking about killing him," Fallon said, but her voice wasn't horrified. It was curious, like she was asking about the weather. "We're talking about natural consequences," Robert corrected smoothly. "Stress-induced cardiac events are very common in elderly patients facing major life changes. Tragic, but not unusual." I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling over. They weren't just planning to steal from me, they were planning to murder me. And my own daughter was part of it. I forced myself to keep watching, to gather as much evidence as possible. Over the next hour of footage, they laid out their entire plan in chilling detail. The conservatorship hearing would be a formality. They had already spoken to a doctor who would testify that I was suffering from dementia and could no longer manage my affairs. The doctor had never examined me, but Robert had assured him that was just a technicality. Once they had legal control, they would begin liquidating my assets. The ranch would be sold to a development company, one owned by Robert's brother, who would buy it for half its market value and then immediately resell it for a massive profit. My construction company would be dissolved, its assets stripped and sold. My house would be put on the market. Even my personal belongings would be auctioned off. And me? I would disappear into a care facility where, according to Patricia, these things have a way of resolving themselves naturally. But it was what happened next in the footage that truly broke my heart. After Robert and Patricia had gone to bed, Damon and Fallon stayed at the table. For a moment, I hoped. desperately hoped that my daughter would express some doubt, some remorse, some sign that she still cared about her father. Instead, she leaned across the table and kissed her husband. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," she said, but she was smiling. "Your father made it easy," Damon replied. "Buying this place was like gift wrapping his entire fortune for us." "I almost feel bad," Fallon said, but her tone suggested she didn't feel bad at all. "He worked so hard for all of this. And now we get to enjoy it without working at all." Damon pulled her closer. "Once this is over, we'll have enough money to do whatever we want. Travel, buy houses, live like kings." "What about the guilt?" she asked. "Won't people wonder why we're suddenly so wealthy right after my father dies?" Damon shrugged. "Grief makes people do strange things. Maybe we'll use some of the money to start a foundation in his memory. Very touching, very public. It'll make us look like devoted family members honoring his legacy." They were planning to profit from my murder and then use my name to make themselves look charitable. I sat in that chair for 3 hours, watching months of planning unfold before my eyes. They had been setting this up since before the ranch purchase, possibly since before Damon had even married Fallon. Every conversation, every family dinner, every moment of what I had thought was bonding with my son-in-law had been a performance. They had studied me, learned my weaknesses, identified my blind spots. My love for Fallon had been weaponized against me. My desire to provide for my family had been turned into the mechanism of my own destruction. But as I sat there, watching them celebrate my future demise, something shifted inside me. The fear and heartbreak I had been carrying began to transform into something harder, something more focused. They thought I was a helpless old man who would go quietly into whatever fate they had planned for me. They were wrong. I had built a construction company from nothing. I had survived economic downturns, competitor sabotage, and personal tragedies that would have broken weaker men. I had raised a daughter as a single father after my wife died, worked 3 jobs to put her through college, and sacrificed my own dreams to give her every opportunity. And this was how she repaid me. Fine. If they wanted to play games with a harmless old man, I would show them exactly how dangerous a cornered lion could be. I spent the rest of the morning copying files from the security system to a portable drive I found in the desk drawer. Every conversation, every meeting, every moment of their conspiracy was now safely backed up in multiple locations. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to be smarter than they were, more ruthless than they expected, and most importantly, I needed to make sure that when I struck back, they would never be able to hurt anyone else the way they had hurt me. As I walked back to my small room, passing Fallon in the hallway, I managed to smile at her. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said warmly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" She looked surprised by my pleasant tone. "Morning, Daddy. You seem better today." "I am better," I said, and for the first time in days, I meant it. "I think I'm finally starting to understand my place in all of this." She smiled back, relief evident in her face. "I'm so glad. We were worried about you." "No need to worry," I assured her. "Everything is going to work out exactly as it should." As I closed the door to my room behind me, I could hear her talking to Damon in the next room, telling him that her father seemed to be accepting reality, and that maybe they wouldn't need to accelerate the timeline after all. If only they knew that the reality I was accepting had nothing to do with their plans. The conservatorship hearing was in 5 days. That gave me 5 days to turn the tables on the people who thought they had already won. 5 days to show them that sometimes the prey is more dangerous than the predator. The revelation that this wasn't their first time hit me like a physical blow. I had spent 2 sleepless nights reviewing more security footage, diving deeper into their conversations, when I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. Damon was on the phone with someone, pacing back and forth in the study that used to be mine. And what I heard changed everything I thought I knew about my situation. "No, this one's easier than the Hartford job," he was saying, his voice casual, like he was discussing the weather. "The old man trusts us completely. He actually bought the property himself. Can you believe that? We didn't even have to convince him to make a major purchase. Hartford job. There had been others. Patricia's already got the doctor lined up, same one we used for the Wilson case. Robert's handling the legal side, same playbook as always. Damon laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. The best part is, his daughter is completely on board. Sometimes family members fight us, but this one, she's practically leading the charge. I paused the recording, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the controls. Wilson case, Hartford job. This was a pattern, a business model. I wasn't the first elderly person they had targeted, and if I didn't stop them, I wouldn't be the last. I spent the next day researching everything I could find about the names Damon had mentioned. What I discovered made me physically ill. Harold Wilson, 73, had died of a heart attack 6 months ago, just 2 weeks after his family had him declared incompetent. His estate, worth approximately $8 million, had been quickly liquidated by his conservators, his daughter's in-laws, who had been managing his affairs for his own protection. Margaret Hartford, 69, had suffered a similar fate 8 months before that. Declared incompetent after making several impulsive financial decisions, including purchasing a vacation home for her family. She had died in a care facility 3 weeks after her assets were placed under conservatorship. The pattern was identical in both cases. Elderly person makes a large purchase. Family members express concern about cognitive decline, legal proceedings to establish conservatorship, quick liquidation of assets, convenient death shortly after. And the same law firm had handled both cases, Robert's firm. I was looking at the work of predators who had turned elder abuse into a profitable enterprise. They weren't just stealing from me, they were serial killers whose weapon was the legal system. But what made my chest tighten with a pain that felt like dying was discovering just how long they had been watching me. In the deepest files of the security system, I found footage that went back not days or weeks, but months, before the ranch purchase, before Damon had discovered my financial decision. They had been monitoring me for almost a year, studying my habits, learning my routines, documenting everything that could be used to build a case for my incompetence. And Fallon had been part of it from the beginning. I found video of her in my house, my old house, when I wasn't there. She had a key, of course, but I had never given her permission to come in when I wasn't home. The footage showed her going through my papers, photographing documents, making notes about my financial records. In one particularly damning video, she was on the phone with someone, walking through my living room like she was conducting surveillance. He keeps all his important papers in the desk in his study, she was saying. Bank statements, investment records, everything. He's very organized, very methodical. That's going to work against him when we claim he's losing his mental faculties. She moved to the mantel, where Martha's pictures were displayed, and her voice took on a mocking tone. He talks to the photos sometimes. When he thinks no one's listening, it's actually pretty pathetic. My heart shattered. Those moments, the quiet conversations I had with my late wife's picture, telling her about my day, asking her advice about difficult decisions, Fallon had witnessed them and turned them into evidence of my mental decline. But it was what she said next that destroyed whatever remaining love I had for my daughter. The best part is, he actually thinks I care about him. He's so desperate for family connection that he'll believe anything I tell him. Yesterday, I mentioned how nice it would be to have a place in the country, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. By next week, he'll probably be shopping for ranches. She had manipulated me into buying the ranch. The whole thing had been her idea, planted so carefully that I thought it was my own generous impulse. I sat in that security room, staring at the screen, watching my own daughter orchestrate my destruction, and I felt something inside me die. Not the angry, wounded part that I could live with. What died was the part of me that believed in the goodness of family, in the bonds of blood, in the idea that love could overcome anything. They had killed that part of me, as surely as they planned to kill my body. But as I watched more footage, I began to understand something else, something that gave me hope for the first time in days. They were good at this, but they weren't perfect. In their arrogance, in their certainty that they were dealing with a helpless old man, They had made mistakes. They talked freely about their other crimes, confident that no one was recording them. They used the same phone numbers, the same contacts, the same methods that had worked before. Most importantly, they had underestimated their target. Harold Wilson had been a retired accountant with no family except the daughter who betrayed him. Margaret Hartford had been a widow whose only son lived across the country. They had been isolated, vulnerable, with no one to fight for them when the time came. But I was different. I had built a business from nothing, which meant I understood how systems worked and how they could be manipulated. I had spent 40 years dealing with contractors, suppliers, and competitors who would lie, cheat, and steal if given the opportunity. I knew how to fight back. More importantly, I had something they didn't know about: complete access to their own security system, documenting every word of their conspiracy. That evening at dinner, I played my part perfectly, the confused, resigned old man who was finally accepting his fate. "I've been thinking," I said, cutting my steak with hands that I let tremble slightly. "Maybe you're right about the conservatorship. Maybe I do need help making decisions." The relief around the table was palpable. Damon actually smiled, the first genuine expression I had seen from him since this nightmare began. "That's wonderful to hear, Lionel," Patricia said, reaching across to pat my hand. "It takes a strong man to admit when he needs help." "When is the hearing?" I asked, making my voice sound tired and defeated. "Thursday morning," Robert replied. "Just a formality, really. The judge is very understanding about these situations." Of course the judge was understanding. I wondered how many times Robert had appeared in his courtroom with similar cases. How many elderly people had been legally murdered with this judge's approval. "Will I need to say anything?" I asked. "Just answer the questions honestly," Fallon said, and her tone was gentle, caring, the voice of a loving daughter concerned for her father's well-being. "Tell them how you've been feeling confused lately, how hard it's been to manage everything." I nodded slowly, like a man accepting his fate. "I suppose it will be a relief in a way, not having to worry about all those decisions." "Exactly," Damon said, and his smile was all teeth. "You can just focus on enjoying your retirement. Let us handle all the complicated stuff." After dinner, I excused myself early, claiming fatigue. In my small room, I made several phone calls using a burner phone I had purchased during my walk that afternoon. The first call was to my lawyer, Jim, but not to his office line. I called his personal cell, the one he had given me years ago for emergencies. "Jim, I need to see you tomorrow, privately, and I need you to bring someone with you, someone who specializes in elder abuse cases." "Lionel, what's going on? You sound strange." "I'm about to be murdered," I said simply. "And I have video proof of the entire conspiracy." There was a long silence. "Jesus Christ, Lionel. Are you somewhere safe? For now?" "But the conservatorship hearing is Thursday. After that, I let the implication hang in the air." "Where do you want to meet?" "The old construction site on Highway 12, the one where we built the Morrison house. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone, but bring backup you can trust." My second call was to a private investigator I had used years ago to check on some suppliers who had been overcharging me. Frank Delacourt was retired now, but he still had connections in law enforcement. "Frank, it's Lionel Mackenzie. I need a favor, and it's a matter of life and death." "What kind of favor?" "I need you to look into some suspicious deaths, elderly people who died shortly after being placed under conservatorship. I'll give you names and dates." My third call was the hardest one to make. I dialed the number for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "I need to report a conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud," I said to the agent who answered. "Multiple victims, ongoing operation, and I have video evidence of everything." As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Not for reconciliation with my family, not for forgiveness or understanding, but for justice. They thought Thursday's hearing would be my end. They had no idea it was going to be their beginning, the beginning of the end of their killing spree. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to them celebrate in the other room, I knew I had one more night to get through, one more night of pretending to be their victim. Tomorrow everything would change. I closed my eyes and whispered to Martha's memory, the way I had so many times in the past year. But this time, I wasn't asking for guidance or comfort. This time, I was making a promise. They hurt our daughter too, Martha. They turned her into something we would never recognize. But I'm going to stop them. I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone else the way they hurt us. The house finally grew quiet around midnight, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the night reviewing every piece of evidence I had gathered, every conversation I had recorded, every detail of their conspiracy. By morning, I would be ready for war. And this time, I would be fighting not just for myself, but for Harold Wilson, Margaret Hartford, and every other elderly person who had died because their families saw them as paychecks instead of people. They had picked the wrong old man to mess with. Wednesday morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Today would be my last day of playing the helpless victim. Tomorrow, at the conservatorship hearing, I would spring the trap I had been carefully setting for the past week. But first, I had to survive one more day of their performance. At breakfast, they were all smiles and false concern. Patricia had even made me pancakes. "Your favorites," she said, though she had no idea what my favorites were. The gesture was purely for show, probably in case anyone was watching. "How are you feeling about tomorrow, Daddy?" Fallon asked, cutting her own pancakes with delicate precision. "I know legal proceedings can be scary." "I'm trying not to think about it too much," I said, letting my voice quaver slightly. "I just want what's best for everyone." "That's all we want too," Damon said, reaching across to squeeze my shoulder. The touch made my skin crawl, but I forced myself not to pull away. "Don't worry about a thing. We'll take good care of you." "Take good care of me, right until they killed me." "I was thinking," I said carefully, "maybe I should call Jim, my lawyer, just to understand what's going to happen tomorrow." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Robert set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "That's not necessary, Lionel," he said smoothly. "I'm representing your interests in this matter. Having multiple lawyers involved would just confuse things. But Jim's been my lawyer for 20 years. He knows my wishes." "Your wishes aren't really relevant anymore," Patricia said, her mask slipping just slightly. "This is about what's best for your health and safety." I nodded like I understood, but inside I was celebrating. They were so confident in their control that they weren't even pretending anymore. Everything they said was being recorded by their own security system. "I suppose you're right," I said with a heavy sigh. "I just feel so lost." "That's completely normal," Fallon said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You've been making all your own decisions for so long. It must be overwhelming to let other people take care of things." "It is," I agreed. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't bought this ranch. Maybe none of this would be necessary." "Don't second-guess yourself," Damon said. "That kind of thinking is exactly why you need help. You're not seeing the big picture anymore." After breakfast, I excused myself for my usual morning walk. But instead of wandering aimlessly around the property, I had a very specific destination in mind. I walked to the back 40, where an old access road connected to the highway. Jim's car was waiting exactly where I had asked him to park, hidden behind a stand of trees. He wasn't alone, but there was a woman with him, middle-aged with sharp eyes, and the bearing of someone who had seen too much. "Lionel," Jim said as I approached, his face grave with concern, "are you all right? You look terrible." "I feel terrible," I admitted, "but I'm about to feel a lot better. Did you bring the recorder?" The woman stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Mackenzie, I'm Detective Sarah Chen, Financial Crimes Division. Jim filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear everything from you." For the next hour, I told them everything. About the ranch, about the fake property transfer, about the security footage showing their planning sessions. I gave them copies of all the evidence I had gathered, every conversation, every incriminating moment. Detective Chen's expression grew darker with each revelation. "This is one of the most sophisticated elder abuse operations I've ever seen," she said finally. "How many victims did you say there were?" "At least 2 that I know of, Harold Wilson and Margaret Hartford. But based on their conversations, I think there have been more." "We'll investigate all of it," she promised. "But right now, we need to focus on keeping you alive until tomorrow's hearing." "What do you mean?" Jim leaned forward, his face serious. Lionel, once they realize you're not going to cooperate, you become a liability. These people have killed before. They won't hesitate to kill again. That's why we need you to wear this, Detective Chen said, pulling out a small device that looked like a hearing aid. It's a wire. Everything that happens between now and the hearing will be recorded. I put the device in my ear, amazed by how invisible it was. What about tomorrow, at the hearing? Tomorrow we spring our own trap, she said with a grim smile. Judge Morrison has been briefed. He's going to let them present their case, let them incriminate themselves completely, and then we're going to arrest them all. Including Fallon? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jim's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry, Lionel, but yes, including Fallon. He's as guilty as the rest of them. I walked back to the ranch house feeling like I was carrying a bomb. In a way, I was. The wire in my ear was going to capture whatever final preparations they made, whatever last-minute discussions they had about their plans for me. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, while I was pretending to nap in my room, they held another family meeting. This time, their voices were more urgent, more focused. Something's wrong, Damon was saying. He's acting different today, more aware. You're being paranoid, Patricia replied, but her voice sounded strained. He's just nervous about tomorrow. I don't think so. Did you see the way he looked at me at breakfast? Like he knew something. Knew what? Robert asked. He's an old man who's losing his mind. What could he possibly know? I'm telling you, something's changed. We should move up the timeline. My blood ran cold. Move up the timeline. What are you suggesting? That was Fallon, her voice carefully neutral. I'm suggesting we don't wait for the hearing. We handle this tonight. Silence. Then Patricia's voice, cold and calculating. How? Heart attack? Stress-induced? Poor old man, so worried about tomorrow's hearing that his heart just gave out. Very sad, very believable. The autopsy would show, Robert began. Would show exactly what we want it to show, Damon interrupted. Dr. Hendricks is already on payroll. He'll sign whatever death certificate we need. I gripped the edge of my bed, fighting to keep my breathing steady. They weren't just planning to kill me after the hearing. They were planning to kill me tonight. I don't know, Fallon said hesitantly. It seems rushed. What if someone suspects something? Who would suspect anything? Patricia asked. You're his loving daughter, devastated by his sudden passing. We're the grieving in-laws who tried so hard to help him in his final days. It's perfect. And the property? That was Robert, always focused on the money. Fallon inherits everything as his only child. No conservatorship needed, no messy legal proceedings. Clean and simple. When? Fallon asked, and the fact that she was asking when instead of arguing against it told me everything I needed to know about who my daughter had become. Tonight, after dinner, we'll give him something to help him sleep, and nature will take its course. I forced myself to lie still, to keep breathing normally, even though every instinct was screaming at me to run. But I couldn't run, not yet. I needed them to commit to this plan completely, needed them to incriminate themselves beyond any possibility of denial. What about the mess? Patricia asked. I mean, the physical aspects of it? Damon's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a plumbing problem. Heart attacks are clean. No blood, no struggle. He'll just go to sleep and not wake up. And we all sleep peacefully in our beds, none the wiser until morning when we discover his tragic passing, Robert added, with what sounded like satisfaction. They spent another 20 minutes working out the details. Which medication to use, something that would mimic a heart attack but not show up clearly in a standard autopsy. How to handle the discovery of my body in the morning. What to tell the paramedics, the police, the funeral home. They had it all planned out, down to the specific words Fallon would use when she called 911 in fake hysterics. When they finally dispersed, I lay in my bed for another hour, making sure they were all occupied with their evening routines. Then I quietly slipped out of the house and made my way back to the meeting spot where Detective Chen was waiting. They're going to kill me tonight, I said without preamble. After dinner, her face went hard. Did you get it all on the wire? Every word. Good. Here's what we're going to do. The plan was simple, but risky. I would go back to the house, eat dinner, and pretend to drink whatever they gave me, but Detective Chen would be waiting outside with backup. The moment they thought I was unconscious, she would move in. What if something goes wrong? I asked. What if they realize I'm not really unconscious? Then we move in early, she said grimly. But Lionel, I need you to understand something. Once we do this, there's no going back. Your family will hate you forever. I thought about Fallon, about the little girl who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read her stories, about the young woman I had walked down the aisle, proud and beaming, about the daughter who had just spent the afternoon planning my murder. They're not my family anymore, I said quietly. My family died the day they decided I was worth more to them, dead, than alive. That evening's dinner was a surreal experience. They were all so solicitous, so caring, so concerned about my well-being. Patricia had cooked my favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables. Colin kept asking if I needed anything, if I was comfortable, if I was feeling okay. And all the time, I knew they were waiting for the right moment to drug me. It came with dessert. Robert offered to get me a glass of milk to go with the apple pie. You always loved milk with dessert, didn't you? He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a tall glass of what looked like perfectly normal milk. But I could see the slight cloudiness at the bottom, the way he handled the glass just a little too carefully. Thank you, I said, accepting the glass. You're all so thoughtful. I raised it to my lips, pretended to take a sip, then set it down with a grateful smile. Delicious. Over the next hour, I gradually let my speech slow down, my eyelids grow heavy. I made a show of struggling to stay awake, of fighting the effects of whatever they had given me. I think I need to lie down, I said finally, swaying slightly as I stood. Of course, Daddy, Fallon said, taking my arm with fake concern. You've had a long day. She helped me to my room, tucked me into bed like I was a child. For a moment, looking at her face in the dim light, I almost saw a flicker of the daughter I used to know. But then she spoke. Sleep well, Daddy, she whispered, and there was something cold in her voice that made my blood freeze. Don't worry about anything. When you wake up, all your troubles will be over. When you wake up, except I wasn't supposed to wake up. I waited in the dark, listening to the house settle around me. After what felt like hours, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Hushed voices outside my door. Is he out? Dead to the world. Perfect. How long does it take? 20 minutes, maybe 30? Then we call 911. The door opened quietly, and I forced myself to lie completely still as they entered my room. Through barely cracked eyelids, I could see all four of them. Damon, Patricia, Robert, and yes, Fallon. My own daughter come to watch me die. They stood around my bed like mourners at a funeral, except I wasn't dead yet. That's when Detective Chen and her team burst through the door. The next few minutes were chaos. FBI! Nobody move! Detective Chen's voice cut through the darkness like a blade as tactical lights flooded my small room. The four people who had been standing around my bed like vultures waiting for me to die suddenly found themselves surrounded by federal agents with weapons drawn. I sat up in bed, very much alive and very much awake, and watched their faces change from smug satisfaction to complete shock. That's not possible, Damon whispered, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. You drank the milk. You should be dead, I finished for him. Sorry to disappoint you. Patricia's face had gone completely white. She swayed on her feet as the reality of the situation hit her. You were pretending. This whole time, you were pretending. The same way you were pretending to care about me, I replied, getting out of bed, with steady, unimpaired movements. Difference is, I'm a better actor. Robert, ever the lawyer, immediately started calculating. This is entrapment. Whatever evidence you think you have, it won't hold up in court. Detective Chen smiled grimly as she handcuffed him. Actually, it will. See, everything you've said and done for the past week has been recorded by your own security system, including tonight's conversation about the best way to murder Mr. Mackenzie. But it was Fallon's reaction that broke what was left of my heart. She wasn't looking at the officers or at Detective Chen. She was staring at me with pure, undiluted hatred. You bastard, she whispered. You lying, manipulative bastard. I'm the manipulative one? I couldn't keep the pain out of my voice. Fallon, you planned to murder your own father. Ought. You were going to leave us nothing, she screamed, and suddenly the mask was completely off. This wasn't grief or fear or shock. This was rage at being caught. Everything you had should have been mine. I'm your daughter. You were my daughter, I said quietly. But my daughter died the day she decided I was worth more to her dead than alive. As they were being led away in handcuffs, I heard fragments of their desperate attempts to shift blame. This was all Damon's idea, Patricia was telling anyone who would listen. I just went along with it. My client was clearly coerced, Robert was saying, still trying to lawyer his way out of murder charges. But Damon said nothing. He just looked back at me with eyes full of cold fury, and I knew that even now, even caught red-handed, he felt no remorse, only anger that his plan had failed. Fallon was the last one to be taken away. At the door, she stopped and turned back to me one final time. "I'll never forgive you for this," she said. "I'll never forgive you either," I replied. "But unlike you, I'll sleep peacefully at night, knowing I chose the right side." The trials took 8 months. During that time, Detective Chen's investigation uncovered the full scope of their operation. Harold Wilson and Margaret Hartford were just the tip of the iceberg. Over the past 3 years, they had systematically targeted and murdered 7 elderly people, stealing a combined total of over $60 million. The evidence was overwhelming, not just the security footage from my ranch, but financial records, phone records, testimony from doctors and lawyers who had been bribed to participate in the scheme. Dr. Hendricks, the doctor who would have signed my fake death certificate, broke down and confessed to falsifying death certificates for all 7 victims. Damon got life without parole for multiple counts of first-degree murder. Patricia and Robert each got 25 to life for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud. And Fallon got 15 years for conspiracy and accessory to murder. The prosecutor had offered her a plea deal if she testified against the others, but she refused. Even facing decades in prison, she wouldn't betray the people who had turned her into a monster. I attended every day of the trials. I wanted to look each of them in the eye as the evidence of their crimes was laid bare for the world to see. I wanted them to know that their victims, all of their victims, had someone fighting for them. But mostly, I wanted to make sure they could never hurt anyone else. The ranch sold quickly. I had no desire to live in a place that had been the setting for so much betrayal and evil. I donated the proceeds, all $21 million, to a foundation that investigates elder abuse and provides legal support for elderly people facing conservatorship proceedings. I moved back to my old house, the modest place where Martha and I had been happy, where I had raised Fallon in better days. The memories there were still painful, but they were honest. No lies, no deception, no pretense. Just the truth of a life lived with genuine love, before that love was weaponized against me. People ask me sometimes if I regret turning in my own daughter, if I wish I had found another way, a way that didn't end with her in prison. The answer is always the same. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that she became the kind of person who would murder her own father for money. I regret that the little girl who used to sit on my lap and tell me about her dreams grew up to be someone who dreamed of my death. But I don't regret stopping her, because the truth is, if I hadn't acted when I did, there would have been more victims, more elderly people trusting their families, only to have that trust turned into a weapon against them. More Harold Wilsons and Margaret Hartfords, dying alone and afraid while their children counted the inheritance money. I couldn't save the people who came before me, but I could make sure there wouldn't be people who came after. 6 months after the trials ended, I received a letter. It was from Nancy Wilson, Harold's sister, who had been living across the country when he died. She had always suspected something was wrong with his sudden death, but hadn't known how to prove it. "Thank you," she wrote, "for giving my brother justice, for making sure his death meant something, for having the courage to do what I couldn't." I keep that letter on my kitchen table, next to the photo of Martha. Sometimes when the house feels too quiet and the loneliness too heavy, I read it again and remember why I made the choices I made. I'm 70 now, 4 years older than when this nightmare began, and I feel every one of those years. My hair is completely gray now, my hands shake sometimes, and I move a little slower than I used to. But I'm alive, and more importantly, I'm free. Free from the weight of pretending that blood relations matter more than moral ones. Free from the exhausting work of trying to earn love from people who saw me as a bank account instead of a person. Free from the fear that the people closest to me might be the ones planning my destruction. I have a small circle of friends now. Jim, Detective Chen, a few neighbors who knew me before all this happened and stuck by me through it. We play cards on Thursday nights, share dinner on Sundays, check on each other when the weather's bad. It's not the family I thought I wanted, but it's the family I deserved all along. People who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had never bought that ranch, if I had never given them the opportunity to show me who they really were. But then I remember Harold Wilson, dying alone in confusion and fear. Margaret Hartford, betrayed by the son she had trusted completely. The other victims whose names I learned during the trials, people who never got the chance to fight back, who went to their graves never knowing that their families had murdered them for money. I may have lost my daughter, but I gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I chose justice over comfort, truth over family loyalty, doing what was right over doing what was easy. And at 70 years old, with whatever time I have left stretching out ahead of me, I can say something that many people never get to say. I sleep peacefully at night. Because when it mattered most, when everything was on the line, I chose to be the kind of person Martha would have been proud of. The kind of person who stands up to bullies, even when those bullies share your blood. The kind of person who fights for people who can't fight for themselves. The kind of person who understands that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. My name is Lionel Mackenzie. I'm a father who lost his daughter by refusing to let her become a murderer. I'm a survivor who turned a family betrayal into justice for people I'll never meet. And I'm a man who learned, perhaps too late, but not too late to matter, that the family you choose is often more worthy of your love than the family you're born into. They thought they were stealing my legacy when they planned my death. Instead, they gave me the greatest legacy of all, the chance to make sure their evil ended with me.